On Labor Day, my husband worked himself to death in another woman's bed. Halfway through the funeral, my mother-in-law said to me, "Malcolm's gone, but this family still doesn't have an heir. Clara, you're still young. Have a child with Vincent. The sooner the better." I stared at my brother-in-law in his wheelchair, my mind going blank. But he's Malcolm's brother. "Better to keep it in the family," Nora Stroud said with a smile. "This is my decision. Even if Malcolm were still alive, he'd listen to me." Something in me snapped, and a quiet laugh slipped out. They wanted an heir, didn't they? Fine. Then my father-in-law could have one. When I didn't respond, my mother-in-law, Nora Stroud, raised her voice into the microphone on purpose. "Clara, just have a baby with Vincent. It's the same thing. Once there's a child in this family, everything settles." My gaze shifted to my brother-in-law, Vincent Stroud, sitting beside me in his wheelchair. He had been paralyzed since birth. He couldn't move from the waist down. He even required help going to the bathroom. I thought back to when I first married into the Strouds. Nora would always ask him what he thought of me, whether I looked good. So this had been her plan from the beginning. She never saw me as a daughter-in-law. To her, I was just a body meant to carry children. I looked up at the relatives gathered in the funeral hall, hoping someone might speak up for me. Instead, they all sided with Nora. "Clara, Nora has a point. A wife's job is to carry on the family line. This kind of thing is normal where we're from. If the older brother's gone, the younger one steps in." "Exactly. They paid for you to marry in. You can't just take the money and back out now." A cold laugh settled in my chest. The Strouds paid $20,000 for the marriage, and I brought every cent back with me. Less than 6 months into the marriage, my father-in-law, Quentin Stroud, had gambled it all away. I never saw a dime, but somehow I was the one blamed for taking it. There were too many of them, and I had no interest in arguing with a room full of people like this. I forced a smile. "Fine, Nor. Whatever you say." Only then did Nora lower the microphone, satisfied. The relatives immediately started smiling and offering congratulations. "Clara, congratulations. You get to be a bride again." I looked at Malcolm Stroud's body lying beside me and felt nothing but bitter irony. After the funeral, I dragged my exhausted body home. The moment I looked up, I saw Quentin standing on the balcony. So he hadn't even gone to his own son's funeral. Nora frowned. "What are you doing out there? The wind's strong. You'll catch a cold." A flicker of panic crossed Quentin's face. He quickly hid something behind his back. But I had already seen it. He was holding my underwear. In that instant, everything clicked. The clothes I used to hang out on the balcony would sometimes come back with strange white stains. Sometimes they were fresh and sticky. Sometimes they had already dried, stiff against the fabric. I always thought I hadn't washed them properly. Now I knew. Quentin was behind the stains. I looked at his wrinkled face, but my mind went somewhere darker. Every day, he would grab my underwear, press it against his filthy body, and only stop when he had satisfied himself. My stomach churned, and I nearly threw up. I stumbled back to my room like I was running for my life, my hands still shaking. I had thought that if I gave this family everything I had, I might get something real in return. Today proved otherwise. There wasn't a single normal person in this house. A cheating husband, a perverted father-in-law, and a mother-in-law who saw me as nothing more than livestock. They wanted a child, didn't they? Fine. The Strouds would get their heir. Just not from me. Early the next morning, Nora started in on me again. "Clara, move into Vincent's room today. You two need time to get close. The sooner you do, the sooner you can give me a grandchild." I looked at her and forced a faint smile. "I want to give you a grandchild too, but the doctor said I have a condition that makes it hard to carry a pregnancy. There's a high risk of miscarriage. I need a few days to get treated and build my strength. That way, the baby will be healthy." Nora paused, clearly caught off guard by how cooperative I sounded. "Fine. Do what the doctor says. Your body had better not fail us." After she left, I took a medical report out of the drawer. The one with the problem wasn't me. It was Malcolm. He had already been diagnosed with poor sperm quality. Having a child wasn't possible for him. I had tried to be understanding. I spent money on medication and pushed him to get treatment. In the end, he turned it on me, saying I was the reason we couldn't get pregnant. Now that lie worked in my favor. It bought me time. I was still thinking about it when my phone rang. "You're Malcolm's wife, right? I was the one with him the day he died. What do you want?" I kept my voice even. "He still owes me money. $800. You're his wife, you should pay for it." I almost laughed. My husband died in another woman's bed. Not only did I have to handle his funeral, but now, I had to settle his bill. "Fine," I said quietly. "Meet me at a coffee shop this afternoon. I'll bring the money." At 2 p.m., I met the woman. Her name was Mandy Carver. "This is $800. Count it." I handed her the money. She didn't even glance at it before smiling. "Your husband also said he'd transfer a house to me. And because of him, I've suffered serious emotional distress. I can't even work right now. That house should cover my damages. I looked at her and smiled, going along with it. You're right, but the house is under his dad's name. I don't have the authority to transfer it. She was about to argue, so I lowered my voice. Listen, my father-in-law, Quentin, has more than just that house. He's got plenty of savings, too. Her eyes lit up right away. If you can get on his good side, one house is nothing. You won't have to worry about the rest of your life. I went on. When the time comes, tell him you want something steady. Say you'll give him a son. That's exactly what he wants. Mandy straightened in her seat, her excitement showing. Don't worry. Handling men is easy. If I can deal with Malcolm, I can definitely handle his dad. I took her hand and smiled. Good. I'll arrange for you to meet him soon. By the time I got home, it was almost dark. I changed into a thin slip dress on purpose and sat next to Quentin to watch TV. What's this show about? I asked. He stammered through an answer, but his eyes kept drifting toward me. I could see it clearly. His body was already reacting. The sight of his bloated stomach and yellowed teeth made my stomach turn. I nearly threw up. But if I wanted revenge, I had to see it through. When it was fully dark, I yawned and went back to my room, leaving the door slightly open. As expected, about 30 minutes later, Quentin crept in. Clara, are you asleep? When I didn't answer, he stepped closer. I've been thinking about you. I can't even sleep. He climbed onto my bed, carrying that sour, stale smell with him. What Quentin didn't know was that I wasn't in the bed at all. I had already slipped out through the first floor window. I was in a motel, watching everything through the security camera. When Quentin realized I wasn't there, he kicked the trash can over. Damn it. That woman thinks she can play me. He glanced toward the hallway, worried about waking Nora. Just as he turned to leave, his eyes fell on a small card on the table. What? Is this how Malcolm hired them? He stared at the photo of Mandy on the card, turning it over in his hands. A grin slowly spread across his wrinkled face. Then he dialed the number printed on it. Hello, are you Mandy? How much for everything? All right. I'll come now. Wait for me. He hung up, almost excited, and hurried out. The next morning, Mandy called me. Got him, she said, her voice bright with satisfaction. Your father-in-law is old, but he's still got it in him. I let out a faint smile. Did he say anything? He did. Said the house is his. He's going back today to get the deed and transfer it to me. After the call ended, I couldn't help laughing. That house belonged to both him and Nora. If Nora found out he had given it away to someone like Mandy, I wondered what she would do. Sure enough, that afternoon, I watched through the camera as Quentin turned the house upside down, searching everywhere. When I saw him sneak out with the deed in hand, I finally went home. At dinner, I had just taken a seat when Nora slammed her fork down. Clara. Her long nails came close to my face. When exactly are you going to sleep with Vincent? I paused. I'm still getting my health in order. How long is that supposed to take? It's already been days. Her voice rose sharp and impatient. Don't try to stall me. I picked a date. Tomorrow works. You'll be with Vincent tomorrow. I glanced at Vincent. His head was lowered, almost buried in his bowl. When I didn't answer, Nora slammed the table again. I didn't bring you into this family so you could sit around. Starting tomorrow, you're not going anywhere. You stay here and have that child. So that was it. No one in this house saw me as a person. I agreed on the surface, but under the table, I sent Mandy a message. Come by tomorrow. There's still some hidden cash in the house. The next morning, before it was even light out, Nora's voice rang through the house. Clara, get up. Are you really going to lie there all day? The moment I stepped out of my room, she pushed a cup of dark liquid toward my mouth. Drink it. It'll help you get pregnant. I couldn't dodge in time. A few mouthfuls went down, and I almost threw up. I'll drink it myself. You go do your thing. Once she left, I poured the rest into a potted plant. When I looked up again, I saw Nora in Vincent's room, putting fresh sheets on the bed. She smoothed them out, muttering to herself. Vincent, today's your special day. Don't mess this up. Then she turned and shot me a look. What are you standing there for? The relatives will be here soon. Go greet them. I stood there, stunned. You invited relatives? Before I could even process what was happening, my husband's aunt hurried over with a wide smile and grabbed my hand. Clara, it's your special day today. Good luck. Another relative stepped in beside her. Exactly. Have a son for the Strouds, and you'll be set in this family. An uncle lingered by the doorway, his eyes sliding over me in a way that made my skin crawl. Then he broke into a grin. Clara, where we're from, we have to stir things up a little on the wedding night. As he spoke, his gaze dropped straight to my chest. A chill ran through me, and I instinctively took a step back. When I married Malcolm, I had been worried about this kind of thing, so I didn't invite these relatives to the wedding. This time, Nora had brought them here on purpose. Come on, let's have some fun, the men called out. Before I could react, several hands reached from behind and grabbed my waist. She's got a great figure. Look at those curves. With hips like that, she'll have no trouble having kids. 8 sons easy. They closed in around me, trapping me in place. Sweat broke out across my back as their hands moved over me, rough and uninvited. All right, that's enough. Nora stepped in and pushed them away. Don't overdo it. We've got business to handle. She threw a piece of white veil over my head. It looked like it had been cut from an old sheet, and it carried a faint, unpleasant smell. Now you look like a bride. Before I could see anything, she shoved me into Vincent's room. Vincent's weak, so you need to take the lead. Move a little, understand? Put some effort into it. Take care of him properly. Try to get pregnant in one go. The door slammed shut behind me. I pulled the veil off my head and saw Vincent sitting on the bed, his head lowered, not daring to look at me. I glanced at the clock on the wall. In 3 minutes, Mandy would be here. Clara, he said quietly. Why aren't we starting? Mom said you should take the lead. Hurry up, or we won't be able to explain to everyone. I didn't answer. My eyes stayed on the clock. Vincent grew anxious. She's listening outside the door. Right on cue, Nora's voice came through from the hallway. Clara, what are you doing? Don't mess this up, or you'll answer to me. I ignored her. 30 seconds left. Clara. Vincent's face flushed red. Please. The moment he finished speaking, loud banging erupted at the front door. Then, a woman's sharp voice cut through the house. Quentin, I'm pregnant with your baby. We're settling this today. The room outside went silent. Then the relatives started whispering all at once. Quentin? Isn't that Nora's husband? Who would have thought? He looks so put together, but behind closed doors. Nora's voice shot up. That's ridiculous. My husband would never. I opened the door and walked straight into the living room. Standing in the center, I pointed at Mandy's swollen belly and looked at Nora. Didn't you say the Strouds need an heir? Isn't that baby in her exactly what you wanted? The living room of the Stroud house smelled of stale grease, cabbage, and cheap cigarettes. Nora Stroud stood frozen in the center of the room, her hand still holding the ladle she had used to stir the tea. Her eyes darted from Mandy's stomach to Quentin, who was cowering behind the dining table, his yellow teeth clicking together in a sudden, cold panic. Quentin. Nora's voice was low, vibrating with a guttural rage that made the relatives near the doorway take a step back. What is she talking about? Mandy didn't wait for him to answer. She took 3 steps forward, her high heels clicking sharply on the linoleum, and threw a crumpled piece of paper onto the table. It was an ultrasound report from the county clinic, the name Mandy Carver printed clearly at the top. He signed the deed over to me yesterday morning, Mandy said, her voice high and triumphant. He said he's tired of living with an old, dry bone like you. Wants a son. And I'm giving him one. The relatives erupted into a low, frantic murmur. The deed? The house. Quentin actually gave the house away? And she's pregnant. My God, Malcolm's barely in the ground. Nora didn't look at the paper. She looked at Quentin. With a sharp, animalistic shriek, she lunged across the table, her long, synthetic nails clawing at his face. You old bastard. You gave my house to a whore. I spent 30 years working the fields to build this place. You think you can just hand it over to a girl who slept with our dead son? Nora, stop. It's not what you think. Quentin screamed, his hands flying up to protect his eyes as Nora's nails tore red tracks down his cheeks. He fell backward, his heavy body crashing into the wooden hutch, sending the cheap commemorative plates clattering to the floor. Not what I think. Nora yelled, her voice reaching a frantic, hysterical register. She's standing in my living room with a baby in her belly. She has the deed. I stood by the corridor door, the cheap lace veil still draped over my shoulder, like a discarded rag. I watched them tear each other apart, my face perfectly still. Beside me, Vincent's wheelchair squeaked. He had rolled himself to the doorway, his thin, pale face shadowed with a quiet, hollow terror. He looked at his mother, then at his father, and finally up at me. Clara. He whispered, his voice trembling. Did you do this? I looked down at him. I didn't make your father climb into my bed, Vincent. And I didn't make him sign the deed. They wanted an heir. I simply gave them what they asked for. I reached down, untied the silk ribbon of the veil, and let the white mesh drop into the dust on the floor. Have a nice wedding night, Vincent, I said softly. I turned around, walked into my room, and picked up the small leather suitcase I had kept hidden beneath the crawlspace boards. The back window was already open. I slid through it, my boots landing quietly on the damp earth of the yard, and walked into the cool morning mist. The office of the county sheriff was located in a flat, gray concrete building, next to the grain silos. It smelled of old paper, damp wool, and the bitter dregs of yesterday's coffee. I sat across the desk from Deputy Vance, a quiet man in his 50s with a thick mustache and eyes that had seen 30 years of rural misery. Between us lay a small glass jar filled with dark, damp soil from the potted plant in the Stroud's living room, and a sealed plastic bag containing the 3 stained pairs of underwear I had retrieved from Quentin's balcony hiding spot. You're sure about the tea, Clara? Vance asked, tapping his pen against his yellow notepad. Nora forced me to drink 3 mouthfuls, I said, my voice steady. The rest I poured into the fern by the door. Within 10 minutes, I felt dizzy, my chest felt tight, and my hands started to shake. It wasn't herbs, deputy. It was a sedative. Vance nodded slowly. He picked up the glass jar, turning it over under the buzzing fluorescent light. We'll send the soil to the state lab in the city. If there's prescription-strength diethylstilbestrol or high-concentration sedatives in there, it's a felony. Administering a controlled substance without consent carries up to 12 years. And the clothes? I asked, pointing to the plastic bag. We'll run the DNA match on the stains, Vance said, his face hardening with a professional, cold disgust. Quentin's prints are already in our system from his old gambling arrests. If the match is positive, it's stalking, harassment, and sexual exploitation of a household member. He won't be able to buy his way out of this one. He leaned back in his chair, looking at my pale, tired face. You've been living in that house for 5 years, Clara. Why didn't you come to us sooner? Because in this town, a wife who complains about her father-in-law is called a liar, I said quietly. If I had come here a year ago, Malcolm would have told everyone I was crazy, Nora would have beaten me, and the neighbors would have laughed. I needed the proof to be absolute. Well, Vance said, closing his notebook with a soft snap. It's absolute now. I'm signing the warrant for Quentin's arrest this afternoon. And we'll have a team search the house for the drug bottles. Make sure you look in the locked cabinet in Vincent's room, I said. Nora keeps her special remedies there. I rented a small, cheap room at the Travelers Motel near the highway intersection. It had green shag carpet, a TV that only got 3 channels, and a window that faced the open fields. For the first time in 5 years, the air didn't smell of Quentin's stale sweat or Nora's vinegar cleaner. I spent the afternoon on the bed, my laptop open, reviewing Malcolm's medical files. I had secretly downloaded his diagnostic history from the clinic's digital portal 3 months before he died. The sperm count analysis, signed by Dr. Evans, was clear. Azoospermia. 0 viable sperm. He was completely, irreversibly sterile. But when I turned the page to the billing records, I found a series of payments made to the clinic from Nora's personal savings account. The payments were classified as administrative adjustments. Nora had paid the clinic clerk $500 to falsify the report she showed to me. She had changed the diagnosis to normal, and then had the clerk draft a second fake report in my name, claiming that I was the one with the hostile uterine environment. She had spent 3 years forcing me to drink bitter, black herbal teas, making me feel like a dry, useless branch, while she knew her own precious son was the one who couldn't breed. The door to my motel room was knocked 3 times. I stood up, walked to the door, and slid the chain back. Mandy Carver stood in the gravel driveway, her face pale, her dark hair messy. She was clutching her leather purse to her chest, her high heels covered in the gray mud of the Stroud's yard. Clara, she gasped, her voice trembling. They're crazy. They're completely out of their minds. What happened? I asked, stepping back to let her in. Nora tried to kill me, Mandy sobbed, collapsing onto the orange vinyl chair. The moment you left, she grabbed the kitchen knife. She tried to cut my stomach open. She said if the baby belonged to Quentin, it was a monster and she'd carve it out herself. She pulled her sleeve back, revealing a long, jagged scratch across her forearm, the skin red and swollen. Quentin didn't even help me, she cried. He just ran out of the house with his wallet. The relatives, they were all filming it on their phones. Nobody called the police. I went to the small bathroom, wet a clean towel with cold water, and handed it to her. Where is the deed now, Mandy? I asked. I have it, she said, pulling the blue folder from her purse. But the lawyer told me this morning that because the house was bought during Quentin and Nora's marriage, the transfer isn't valid without Nora's signature. I don't own the house, Clara. I just have a piece of paper. I let out a soft, dry laugh. I know, I said. Mandy stared at me, her eyes widening. You knew? You set me up? I didn't make Quentin sign it, Mandy, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. I told you he had a house and savings. I didn't tell you the transfer would be easy. You wanted to take what was mine, just like you took Malcolm. You thought you were the smart girl who could play the old man for a fool. Clara, please. Mandy's voice cracked. The police, they're at the house. Now, they're arresting Quentin. And Nora is being taken to the state hospital in handcuffs because she wouldn't stop screaming that she was going to burn the town down. She reached out, trying to grab my hand. What am I supposed to do? I have no money, and this baby. The baby isn't Quentin's, is it, Mandy? I asked, my voice dropping into a quiet, clinical whisper. Mandy froze. Her hand stopped moving, her lips parting in a sudden, terrified silence. You were Malcolm's mistress for 2 years, I said. You knew he was sterile. You knew because you tried to get pregnant to force him to leave me, and you couldn't. This baby. It belongs to the bartender at the Roadhouse, doesn't it? Mandy covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking as she let out a low, ragged sob. He was going to leave you, she whispered. He promised me. He's dead, Mandy, I said, standing up and opening the door. And his family is gone. Go back to the bartender. And leave this town before Deputy Vance starts looking at your medical records too. The arrest of Quentin Stroud was the largest scandal the county had seen in a decade. By Wednesday morning, the local newspaper's front page was dominated by the headline, Local Patriarch Arrested for Felony Harassment and Chemical Assault. The story was brutal. The state lab had returned the results of the soil test. The fern by the Stroud's door contained a high concentration of triazolam, a prescription-strength sleeping aid, and clomiphene, a fertility drug that Nora had been buying from a black market veterinary supplier. Nora was charged with 3 counts of administering a poison with intent to injure and 2 counts of illegal possession of a controlled substance. Because of her violent outburst against Mandy and the officers, she was held without bail at the secure forensic unit of the state hospital. Quentin's DNA match was positive on all 3 pairs of underwear. Faced with the evidence, and the security footage from my bedroom that showed him sneaking into my room with his pants undone, he pleaded guilty to sexual harassment, stalking, and domestic exploitation. The family's assets, the house, the land, and the small savings account Quentin hadn't managed to gamble away, were frozen by the court to pay for the legal fees and the restitution I had filed for through my lawyer. On Friday afternoon, I went back to the Stroud house one last time to collect my remaining papers. The front yard was quiet. The relatives' cars were gone, the cheap wedding decorations torn and scattered across the lawn like wet leaves. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house smelled of dust, sour milk, and the cold, damp scent of plaster. The hutch was still broken on the floor, the shards of Nora's plates reflecting the pale gray light of the window. I walked into Vincent's room. He was sitting in his wheelchair, his head lowered, his hands resting on his thin knees. He hadn't changed his clothes in 3 days. The room was cold, the radiator giving a low, dying hiss. Vincent, I said. He slowly raised his head. His eyes were red, his face thin and hollow, his lips dry and cracked. They took them, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The police, they took Mom and Dad. The social worker came yesterday. She said they're going to put me in a state home upstate. I know, I said. Clara. He looked at me, a desperate, childish hope in his eyes. You have the money now, don't you? The lawyer said you're getting the house and the land. Can't you keep me here? I won't cause trouble. I'll do whatever you want. I looked at him, this boy who had sat in his wheelchair for years, watching his father harass me, watching his mother force me to drink poison, and saying nothing because he was comfortable, because he was the special one who didn't have to work. No, Vincent, I said softly. I'm not your mother, and I'm not your nurse. But I'm Malcolm's brother, he cried, his tears finally falling. You're my family. The Strouds were never my family, Vincent, I said, taking my passport and my graduation certificate from the desk drawer. You were just a debt I had to pay, and the account is finally closed. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room. The highway out of town was straight, black, and lined with golden fields of wheat that stretched all the way to the horizon. I drove my second-hand sedan, the windows rolled down, the warm wind whipping through my hair. The small leather suitcase was in the back seat, beside the folder containing the court's final divorce decree and the bank transfer confirmation of my $22,000. I didn't feel a sudden, triumphant joy. I didn't feel like a hero in a movie. I simply felt the cool, clean air in my lungs, and the steady, solid weight of the steering wheel under my hands. I had married into the dark, and I had fought my way out with nothing but my own 2 hands and a small security camera. I looked in the rearview mirror. The grain silos of the town were growing smaller, shrinking into tiny gray dots against the blue sky, until they finally vanished behind the curve of the hill. I stepped on the gas. The road ahead was open, quiet, and completely mine.